Anthony Rendon type kind of guy that's going to balance it out with that average, and that's been there before, and has MVP caliber behind him as you're building. You don't want to take. I mean, you can, but just hypothetically, which is possible. You go Kyle Tucker and Luis Robert. Now you're just taking on all the risk. I mean, if it works, that's great to the moon. But most likely, I don't know if both are working out. Put it that way. The odds have not been in your favor from past. I'll say that.
Yeah. So I want to talk a little about some of the differences between NFBC and home leagues. As far as some of the rules, NFBC offers no trading, no injured list, limited 7-man bench. Lineups are set twice a week for hitters, so you set them on Monday, and just for the hitters, not the pitchers, you can switch them up on Friday. So let's go through some of these things and what you think that differs and how it's different from the gameplay of the home league. So let's start with a 7-man bench, no injured list, right? Just a full there. What do you see as the biggest difference in how you run your game during the year?
I think it makes it, cataclysmic difference as, just having, that 7-man bench. It changes everything. And I think it's awesome. When I was just doing home leagues and I first got into the NFBC, I was like, maybe I wasn't a fan of it. And then you realize it just makes, like you guys were just talking about Trey Turner and holding him for 3 months. It's difficult with a 7-man bench. Like, say, if you plant your flag on Trey Turner, which is fine, that leaves you with 6 bench spots. Now, you can't draft Trey Turner and 2 other rookies. You got Trey Turner, and you got to fill out your bench. Now, as you mentioned before, that for the hitters, you can set the lineup twice a week. So you want to play those. You want to have guys that benefit matchups, like left-hander, guys that crush lefties. If that on the weekend, you could put that guy in, they're facing 2 lefties. That's what you're looking at. I mean, that's what you should be looking at. I'll say that. So, I mean, the limit there with the 7-man bench, the no IL, I almost said IR. Excuse me. No IL, I think it makes a huge difference. It's a huge importance. And I now love it.
Right. Ruvain, your thoughts on how the roster, 7-man bench, and no IL affect the difference in gameplay?
For the 7-man bench, you have to plan your bench before the draft starts. You have to say, okay, you know what? On my bench, I'm going to need 1 outfielder. I'm going to need 1 middle infielder, 1 corner infield. It doesn't always work out that way. And 1 guy who has multiple position eligibility. That way you have a very good balanced bench. You can throw in a rookie there if you want. You can throw in an injury guy who you want to hold on to for a little bit longer. You got cheap. That's perfectly fine. But the problem is that there's no injured list. If there's no injured list, you have to know when to cut the cord on players who are hurt. We made a bad mistake. We had Noah Syndergaard, and we held on to him thinking we'd get a month out of him when he was that year when he had his oblique issue. We thought we'd get a month out of him, and we got nothing out of him. We got 1 start, which was, he wasted a roster spot. He wasted a spot where we could have picked up another person that could have had at least replacement value for him, and it threw off our whole season, and we had basically no chance. If that happens to a couple of your players, then you have to decide which one you want to cut first, because if you keep them on your bench too long and you don't make up those stats, sometimes you can fall into a hole that you're not going to catch up in. Now, if you do a home league, I'm a commissioner for a home league, and what I've been doing is I actually have a 5 IL spot, only 5 spots for IL because of COVID, because there's so many different issues that are going on that there are more people being put in these IL situations, so that nowadays you need it. So that's what makes NFBC that much harder to win.
I'm not really a fan of the way that the NFBC constructs the roster. For me, I'd rather have a smaller bench and some IL slots to take some luck out of it. I mean, if you have 5 injuries on your team and somebody just has 1 injury, you're at a disadvantage just from luck. I'd rather have skill play out. So to me, the IL at least lets you hold that player without making the roster decision. Obviously, it's a skill to know how to use your roster and when to cut him. But to me, I'm not a fan of that, and it makes it tougher. You have to cut players sooner because you just don't have the room. Now, you mentioned the Trey Turner we took. That was a top prospect that we knew was going to play substantial time. There aren't that many that is going to hit the ground running. I mean, maybe Jared Kelenic this year, is going to come up after a month or so he's worth it. I know Chris Bryant a couple of years ago did the same thing. But in general, I shy away from, in the NFBC, taking these rookies prospects because it just takes up a very valuable roster slot. You also have to be able to incorporate some of the multi-positional eligible players because you have a limited spot. Having one of those you're able to use them more to help you, and you can get another pitcher. So one of the things that the limited 7-man bench deals with is you might want to put an extra hitter instead of another pitcher on your bench because you can take use of the two lineup changers a week, and you might have to cover some of the bases of whether someone gets hurt. If I had an IL slot, well, I can take I'm not going to say I'm going to flood my bench roster with pitchers, but I would probably take an extra one. Question for you, Matt. Do you think how much more valuable are multi-eligible position players in this NFBC game? And should they be pushed up a little bit more in drafts? We had on Todd Zola earlier this year, and he made the case that it really isn't much of a value because you're not taking so much use of the value. There's just so many people with multiplayer eligibility nowadays where in a best ball format, where it selects for you automatically the one who performed most, you're taking more advantage of it there, but not so much in the NFBC format. I disagree because I think that there's quite a bit of use in how you make your roster. So that's a value in of it itself. Wondering what you think about that.
I mean, I kind of agree with Todd. I understand that having that position flexibility, it is great, especially when you get injuries with no IL. But I'm never going to really pass up. I'm not the players got to be pretty even, or close to even that of the guy that I think is better that has single eligibility. Because that's just maybe how I'm wired. It's not that I don't like it, but usually if a guy's like second base, outfield, a lot of them you want to start at second base. You really don't want to start at outfield. If you got a catcher first base and he's catcher, you really don't want to put that catcher at first base. Now there's the guys like Andres Jimenez who has speed and has 3 different infield positions, or a guy I'm a big fan of, Chris Taylor, who's second, short, and outfield. Yeah, no, I mean, it's great, but I think I want to have a plan before I go into the draft on what I want my team to look like. And if I can get those guys, then great. If those guys, say, help me, like a Jimenez can help me with speed, say I started off and I got everything else, but I'm a little light in speed, a guy like Jimenez who, even if he starts in the minors for 3 weeks, a month, I don't think he's staying down there long. They just gave up their franchise player for him, and they're going to need him. That's, it's not a great offense. So that's the way I look. I'm kind of more with Todd on that. In a draft champions, maybe so, because, you have no in-season pickups, and if you get injuries, it helps you out.
The pitchers are really very volatile. And in the NFBC, the groupthink is to take an ace early. There's the pocket aces strategy where you take 2 aces in the first 3 rounds. And pitchers have just been very, very fickle. We know that the elite pitchers have been great. But, nowadays, especially after the short season, who knows in terms of the volume? There's going to be less separation between pitchers. In terms of volume, there's going to be a lot more pitchers capped or maybe a skip start or maybe 6-man rotations than you think. Shouldn't pitchers be a little bit less valuable? The question to you is, do you think that the NFBC is right, the players are right for pushing pitching so much as they do? And being that it happens, right, why are you of the mindset that you should also be doing that, or do you think that maybe you should zag and not really go for pitchers, maybe take hitters your first 3 rounds, or how would you play this potential ability to zig and zag while everybody else is zigging?
Well, I think, at least for as long as I've been playing the NFBC, pitching has been pushed early. Not like it has this year. It's really gone full steam ahead, or even ADPs that wouldn't move till like March. Like guys in the 10th round maybe move up to the 8th round in March. That's happening in January and February. But pitching has always been pushed in the NFBC. I think in that format, you kind of need that stud. I've always been on board with, I'm not saying I was getting 2, but I would have 1 early on. It didn't have to be the first, maybe the second, but, within those first 3 rounds, 4 rounds, by the 5th, I was walking out with 2 starters always. So for me this year, I agree. I agree on the fact of this statement that they're all very risky because they all got, it was a unique season. Who pitched 46 innings, who pitched 62 innings, who pitched 73. They had to start and stop spring training. So it's just, yes, some guys are more risky than others, but I think in general this year. But I'll disagree and say I think DeGrom and say the Coles, and I'll even put Bieber in there now. Those guys are worth it. They're worth that early pick. Yes, maybe DeGrom after throwing, he was even better last year and he hit 133 times. Maybe this is the year his arm blows off. I don't know. But the guy hasn't shown me, even with all the injuries I keep seeing about, he keeps taking the ball every 5th day. He makes the starts every year. So I'm not going to run away from that. I'm going to embrace his greatness. And the same with Garrett Cole as well. Cole's going to get that ball. He hasn't shown me something where, like last year, he was out for a month because of his shoulder. No. So, and Bieber seems to, have arrived. I mean, it was 2 months. You would love to have seen what happens over 6, but I think you could see from the second half of 19 where he was coming and how it played out for the 2 months. So I think making that commitment, now you're passing up some great hitters and all that speed, but you're getting that foundation there. You're getting that where, I think you're going to need excess pitching upon pitching this year, and you're going to see a lot of injuries. So, I think getting that foundation is a leg up, put it that way.
Yeah, I agree with you totally that DeGrom and Cole are, and also you can make the case for Bieber, are very special. And there's a case to be made that DeGrom should be the number 1 overall pick.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but as far as the draft champions I've done, and I've been pretty much been in every 400 one over the last month, DeGrom is pretty much going. He's definitely going in the top 3, and if he's not 1, he's 2.
Yeah, no, and there's a definite case for that. Ruben, what's your take on all this pitching being pushed up so much, and should we do that?
I think it was just a market correction. I think before the pitchers just weren't valued the way they are, the way they should have been. Pitching is 50% of the points. It's 5 by 5, so it's 50% of the points, and they get the same amount of points. They can gain you the same amount of points that a hitter, a 5-tool hitter can, or a 4-tool hitter can get you the same amount of stats that a starting pitcher can get you. You can get 4 categories from them, so they should be just as valuable. And I think it was just a market correction where the pitchers before were undervalued, and you know what? Because the market is doing that now, if you go away from that, you're going to end up with nothing. You're going to be shut out, and if you do that, you're really risking yourself to not get those points, and you're going to be hoping on these other players. You can listen, if you want to do stars and scrubs, do it that way. That's perfectly fine, but you have to have those stars because those scrubs won't make up the rest of those points.
Yeah, the answer is that it really doesn't matter what you think is the real answer as far as why pitching is being pushed up. It is. And you have to live with the fact that, and we mentioned this on last week's show, what is the right hitter versus pitcher split for the overall values that you get? And the answer is it's whatever the market does. If pitcher values are being pushed up that much and there's a higher percentage going from hitters to pitchers, then you have to do that too. I believe that if you do not take a pitcher in the first 4 rounds, then you are going to leave yourself very short of value in comparison to the rest of the field. You're not going to make up those $40